Episode of our Fireside Chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Before we get started with today's show, I want to remind you that you can find this show along with our other shows such as Running Tales with Craig Lewis, Beyond the Finish Line with Joe Harden, Food Fight Friday at the Aid Station with Adam Lee and myself, as well as What's in Your Earbuds with Om Gandhi and his co-host, Joe Harden, over on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, you name it, we are there. And when you get there, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review so that we can keep these amazing guests coming on and providing you with inspiration and motivation from everyday athletes like yourself, as well as tips from experts in the fields of nutrition, sports psychology, and coaching, which is where we're headed to today. Today, we have Jason Fitzgerald, the founder of Strength Running and the host of the Strength Running podcast. Jason is a columnist for Trail Runner magazine. He has also written several books, including Running for Health and Happiness, 52 Workouts, 52 Weeks, One Faster Runner, 101 Simple Ways to Be a Better Runner, and many, many more. Let's bring Jason on to the show. Hey, Jason, how are you, buddy? Thanks for joining me.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me, Jason.
First of all, it's going to be very confusing for people listening when it's like, hey, Jason, thanks, Jason. Goodbye, Jason.
Yeah, the two Jasons. If it's easier, you can just call me Fitz. It's
perfect.
An old nickname. That'll work.
And my nickname, it's amazing, right? So we do have similar, for obviously exactly the same first name, but similar like last names. And most people have nicknamed me Baja over the course of my time here. So it's interesting how that has also worked out. Before I get started with the first question, I also do want to thank Emily Holland for connecting us. I chatted with Emily a couple of weeks ago, and she thought that we should connect and have you as a guest on our show. So I'm thrilled that happened. Thank you, Emily, for putting that together. I want to jump right into this. A couple of days ago, you tweeted out, "I love the do the best you can framework for training decisions." And why is it that you love that mindset, especially given in today's society with social media where it's, never skip a Monday, grind at all costs type of thing? Why is that a mindset that you love?
Well, I think it's really important because it's so easy to get something in, but it's also sometimes very difficult to get in the perfect workout. If you have a workout and you're supposed to do a dynamic warm-up routine and some easy running and drills and strides, and then the workout itself, and then you have a cool down, and then you might be doing some mobility work or strength training. Next thing you know, this is a really complicated training session. You just have a lot of moving pieces here. And most of us are not professional athletes. Most of us have jobs and careers and families and hobbies and other interests outside of sport. And so if you can't get in the perfect workout, can you get in 95% of it or 90% of it? Because often our body doesn't really know the difference between a 95% workout and a 100% workout. And the only part of us that really beats us up about it is our psychology. Oh, I was supposed to run 8 miles today and I didn't really have time, so I only ran 7. Look, like the world will keep spinning. Your fitness will keep building, you're going to keep progressing as an athlete. And so it's just this realization that we can rarely be perfect, and that's okay. It's okay to do 85% of the workout that you had planned. If you're not feeling good, maybe the workout that you have planned, you can slow down the paces or you can cut the volume a little bit. One of the things that I love about running and many other endurance sports too, like cycling as well, is that you can scale workouts up and down. And so if you are a little bit short on time, or maybe you're a little bit sore or fatigued from a prior training session, you can scale a training session back a little bit and still get the majority of the benefits that you're looking for. And I found the only real drawback is that you tend to think that you're not getting what you should be getting. Oh, my coach made me this training plan. I didn't do the workout exactly as he had written. I'm a failure. Well, that's not the case at all. Almost every workout is probably going to be run a little bit differently than how it's written, and that's okay.
You just brought up three different topics, and I've mentioned in the green room, I have a handful of questions for you, but I like to listen to what the guest is saying so I could tap into that. So we talked about Stevie Lynn Smith in the green room too, and a few weeks ago she mentioned endurance sports being your entire identity and going out and finding other hobbies. How do you deal with the athletes that you're coaching when you start to see them getting into this endurance sports is the only thing mindset?
Yeah, it can be really difficult. And I'm also someone who believes a little bit of obsession is a good thing. If you are really challenging yourself with a long-term aggressive goal, maybe you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, you want to run a sub 3 marathon. I think a little bit of healthy obsession is a really good thing, and it's going to help you accomplish that goal. Now, with that said, you can't veer into the unhealthy obsession territory. And that's where running and training starts to become your entire personality. It's the only thing that you care about. And so for the athletes that I coach that I think are getting a little bit too far in the weeds of everything's important, I need to do everything perfectly. I try to give them flexibility, number one, in their training plan to do things a little bit loosey goosey and not have everything written down exactly to a T. Because when you have a little bit of that flexibility, there really is no perfect. And so you start to get away from perfection because, instead of running, a lactate threshold workout at 6:10 per mile, I might tell an athlete, well, here's a wider pace range. Start on the slow end, see how you feel. And as long as you're somewhere near that range, I'm going to be pretty confident that you're getting the benefits of that workout. And it's going to be really hard for them to try to make that a perfect workout. The other thing that I'll do is I will routinely communicate with them as often as I can that perfection isn't necessary, that the training plan I've written for you is a set of directions to your final destination, to your goal. But you can take a detour. You can go a little bit of a different way. We can move around your workouts or reschedule a recovery week. And your body's physiology often doesn't really respond to perfection. It doesn't respond to that perfect training plan that you've created. It responds generally to the stress load that you're under, and you can be pretty flexible with that and still get the adaptations that you're looking for. So part of it is just, repetition. I want my athletes to know on a regular basis, they don't have to be perfect, that they can run a little bit less, maybe even a little bit more. They can run workouts a little bit slower. And then when they start achieving their goals, even with not having perfect training, then I feel like they're much more bought into this idea that, hey, I don't have to, get super anxious and worry about my training all the time because, Jason's shown me that I can be much more flexible and not worry about it so much and still achieve my goals.
It's amazing, right? When that shift happens, when that click happens, when it's like, I've been trying to be so perfect. I've been trying to hit this mileage. I've been trying to hit this pace. I've been trying to hit these watts if you're on the bike. And I haven't done it. And yet I still see my fitness growing. I still see my goals being achieved. When you see that as a coach, when they come back to you for that second cycle, how is their mentality changed to get them to that next goal? Because presumably the next goal is a progressive goal, right? I ran a 3:30 marathon. Now I want to run a 3:20, let's say. Obviously, the intensity is going to have to be there and things are going to have to be slightly different to get them to that next progressive goal. How do you, as a coach, adjust now to them realizing perfection isn't necessary, but paying attention to Jason is?
Yes, you always want to pay attention to coach. Uh, I try to be the kind of coach that is like almost like the opposite of a drill sergeant. I'm very understanding when running is not your first priority because, to be honest, it's not my first priority. Strength running is a high priority. I have 3 kids. Those things are much more important to me than my personal running. But with that said, I think we can take a very similar mentality from season to season, as long as it's a healthy mentality. Of course, that means maybe we're going to run a little bit more mileage. Maybe we're going to do workouts that are a little bit longer, or we're going to update your pace goals so that they're a little bit faster this cycle. And there's a lot of things that we can change in the training program to keep those adaptations coming if you're training for a marathon or any kind of race. And so what I would try to do with the athlete is if they're continuing to kind of think that they have to train perfectly to get the results that they want, even if they had that season beforehand where they didn't train perfectly, but they still accomplished all their goals. I will just sort of have a one-on-one chat with them to discuss like what happened in the past, and that showed us that we can veer from the plan. You're still going to gain the fitness that's needed. And even if you don't, look, even if we don't have a great training cycle for whatever reason it might be, these are all learning opportunities. We can learn what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you like, what you don't like. Some runners just don't like training for marathons, so they don't train for marathons. And that's a really important way to kind of not get yourself burned out from a goal, because you don't actually care about the goal too much, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of keep runners bought into the program. But I think keeping the progressions manageable over time, and just making sure that the runner is targeting goals that they actually care about.
So you're giving me so much food for thought as we're talking, and I've been writing down notes as we're talking. In the first question, your first response, I should say, you mentioned running 8 miles, and then in this one, you mentioned, certain mileage, and then you also mentioned time. When you're looking at putting together a training plan, is there a balance between setting up a training plan that calls for go and running a specific number of miles, as well as a set amount of time, knowing that that their average pace is about X, which should get you to a certain amount of miles, but you don't want to put the pressure on them to run those miles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the training plan itself will look pretty formal and, very clear cut. But then my communication with the athlete on the back end will be much more flexible, right? So the training plan won't look flexible, but my communication will definitely be flexible. And on the training plan itself, I generally like to write distance based training plans rather than time based training plans, because at the end of the day, running is a distance based sport. You go and race a 5K or a marathon or a half marathon. It's very rare that you go and race an hour or 30 minutes. You don't try to get as much distance over a predetermined time. You try to run a predetermined distance in the fastest time possible. So it's really distance and pace oriented rather than time and effort oriented, even though that some workouts will be time based rather than distance based, and sometimes we're going to be worrying a little bit more about effort than your actual pace. But typically I will opt for distance and pace, because that's really what the sport is oriented around.
So what happens when an athlete comes to you and they're like, I want to run this backyard ultra, or I want to run this 6 hour looped event? Like, is there an adjustment that you have to make then at that point? Because they are going to be running for a time, or in the case of a backyard ultra, they might have a fixed distance, but it's going to be over, right, an hour each time they do the 4.16 miles or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think in those situations, it's going to be really important to train whatever strength and weakness the runner has at the time. So if you're a new ultra runner and you're training for a 6 hour race, that might be similar to a 50K. It might be a little bit closer to a 60K. So we can use the training principles from those distances to give us guardrails around our training approach. Now, with that said, for those events, I would want a little bit more of a hybrid approach, where sometimes your long runs are going to be time based, where I want you getting on the trails. Usually these ultras are on alternative surfaces than the road. So let's get on a similar surface as the race. And, maybe it's not a 6 hour long run, but maybe we might do a 4 hour long run. And there's really no pace or distance goal here. There might be some general guidelines and things like that, but ultimately I'm looking for time on feet. I'm looking for a fueling strategy over the course of that 4-hour long run. And just practicing with the gear and equipment that you're going to use on race day is all really important. So if you are training for a very long event or a time-based event, I'm probably going to use a hybrid approach.
Do you listen to music when you run?
I don't. I sometimes listen to podcasts when I run. So it's either podcasts or nothing at all.
So the reason why I bring it up is, one, we have a show called What's in Your Earbuds that one of our co-owners, and Joe Harden, who also hosts Beyond the Finish Line, podcast, is hosting. And I'm going to be running a 6-hour looped event in October. And because it's not bad enough to just run around a 1 mile loop for 6 hours, the idea is to listen to one song for as long as I can during those 6 hours. So exactly the face you made. Exactly. And I don't listen to music. I literally have 2 songs on my phone, both by the Pet Shop Boys. So I don't listen to music. So they're trying to figure out the best song for this challenge and see what we could come up. So I was going to ask you, what song would you nominate for the one song to listen to?
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't think I could do that. That's some real mental toughness training right there, Jason. Good for you.
When people say that's real mental toughness training, all I hear is that's a really dumb idea. But go for it yourself.
Yeah, not for me.
One of the things you mentioned earlier in the conversation as well was if the athlete is sore or fatigued. And I go back to this thing. I often ask coaches about this because in today's world, people are posting their best of, right? When they go to Strava, it's like, I had an easy run today. Their runs are in zone 5. Or, they're posting all these great pictures on Instagram, videos on TikTok. And you might fall into this trap of comparing yourself to that best of component there. Your thoughts on recovery? How do you implement it as a coach? Have you ever had to, I don't want to say force, right? Because you can't actually grab somebody and sit them down in a chair, but how do you get somebody to understand how important recovery is?
It can be tough sometimes because runners are definitely a little bit type A. They want to feel like they are working hard, and recovery, resting, slowing down, maybe running fewer miles. These things kind of communicate to the athlete that I'm not working hard, and that's just a tough place to be. But ideally, recovery is sort of taken care of in the training plan itself. So if you are running appropriate workouts for your fitness level, appropriate mileage levels, appropriate number of days of running per week, and an appropriate long run for your abilities, you're going to be experiencing a proper amount of soreness and fatigue. Because let's be honest, you don't want to experience no soreness or fatigue, because those things indicate that you're working hard, you're stressing your body, and your body is going to ultimately adapt to that stress, and you're going to become a better runner, stronger, faster, etc. But the problem is when you're like too sore, you're too tired, that you can't hit your splits in a workout, or you just can't finish a run because you're so fatigued and tired. That's where you're either running too much, or a much more likely culprit is that you're probably running too fast. Either your workouts are way too aggressive, or you're just running some of those in between easy or base runs at too quick of an effort. Recovery is something that, we always want to talk about, what do you do for recovery? When it's really interesting, recovery is something that your body does by itself when you're not doing anything. So it's interesting. Recovery is turned into this active verb, that's something that you do, as opposed to a natural physiological process that you can help along or you can hinder. So helping along your recovery, it's really the basics. It's making sure you're getting enough sleep and eating well, eating enough, staying hydrated, and on all those little things that we know are really important. Stronger runners are going to have better recovery, doing some mobility work and foam rolling. All these things are important. It's probably not news to anyone listening to this. But what is the most important is the structure of your training. It's not doing a workout that's so hard that 3 days later you're so sore you can't go for your long run. Like, I would rather you do a much easier workout and then be able to do the rest of your training than just have that one brutally hard workout that, then kind of ruins the rest of your training week. And so for the runners that struggle with this, I will often try to give them dedicated days where they have a ceiling for their pace. So, their easy pace range, I might make it up and just say, like, okay, you're usually around 8:30 to 9 minutes a mile for your easy running pace. For this one run a week, you are not allowed to have a single mile faster than 9 minutes a mile. And I will be kind of adamant about that, because a lot of the other times they're like, oh, I felt good. And next thing you know, they're running 8:20s, they're running 8:15s. And then 2 weeks later, their ankle hurts and they're not sure why. And of course, we can't pin it exactly on, well, you keep doing all your runs 15 seconds per mile faster than I think you really should be. But it's an obvious training error. And if you're experiencing excessive fatigue or niggles or a lot of soreness, step number one is just like, okay, where are training errors and how can we reduce or eliminate them so that I'm training a little bit more strategically? So that's kind of how I think about the recovery process, and actively trying to get runners to slow down a little bit so that, they can actually hit those workouts in those long runs.
I'm guessing the percentage of athletes that go below their number at that 8:20 in comparison to 8:30 is closer to 100%. But what's the percentage of athletes that'll actually run 9:10 when they're not allowed to run in that area?
When I'm being a little bit more of a strict coach, I'll probably get a good 50% adherence. Sometimes they might dip under that little barrier there a few times, but it's okay. They're still getting like most of the real. They're accomplishing the spirit of the workout.
For the, I believe I have this correct. You started your business in 2010. Is that correct?
Yes, strength running actually started in 2009, but it was just a static coaching website. There was no blog. I didn't have a YouTube channel or a podcast, so there really wasn't anything there. And I thought if you build it, they will come, but I was wrong.
For those of us that are in marketing, we love to hear that, because yes, you could build it, but you have to market it as well.
Yes. So about a year after I started the strength running website, that's when I realized I need to actually like demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about. So that's when I started writing articles for strengthrunning.com, built out the blog I've been writing now for over a decade, and I think we have about 1,000 published articles on strength running.
Yeah, the website is filled. So for those of you that are listening, go check it out. We'll get the URL into the notes as well, and Jason will give us where we can find him later on. But the website is filled with all kinds of great information that's up there for free, let alone the information you'll get when you hire him as a coach. The thing I wanted to ask you is, over the last 14 years, what has been one of the best things that you've seen about running as you've gone from this sort of, just prior to social media becoming a big thing, to social media becoming a massive thing, Strava coming about, TikTok videos and all kinds of stuff? What's been one or three of the best things that you've seen in your time since you started coaching?
With regard specifically to social media?
With regards to running in general, it may be because social media had a hand in it, or it may just be, the coaching, maybe your athletes are more attentive to you, things like that.
Yeah, I have found that I think there's a lot more information out there today, and that has its own, it's a double-edged sword, of course. But for the most part, I've found that a lot of runners are now embracing what I'll call best practices. So, 15 years ago, it was very difficult to get runners to do any kind of strength training because we're runners. We don't like to do that. Would rather go out there running. I'm kind of one of those runners myself. Like, I totally understand. But at the same time, strength training is so necessary to keep us healthy, to optimize our performances. And it's just not even what I would consider cross training. It is just part of the training that we have to do if we want to reach our potential. And I've seen a lot more runners now embrace strength training and just recognize that, hey, I might not love this, but it's something that I have to do. It's going to keep me healthy, especially if you're a master's athlete, if you're over 40, especially if you're over 50. Yeah, me and you both, Jason. It's really important. It's important for maintaining our bone mass. Sarcopenia is a really big issue for older men who are losing about 1 to 2% of their muscle mass every year. That's really problematic when you stretch that out over 5, 10, 15 years. So you've got to be in the weight room. You've got to be lifting weights. And more runners are now recognizing that this is important for my overall health, but it's also really important for my running specific health. And I've seen runners embrace dynamic warm-ups over static stretching. And so there's a really great, aspect to social media that it brings a lot of really good ideas to the forefront that a lot of more runners are embracing now. Now, the dark underbelly of social media is that if you know how to get popular on social media, you don't actually have to know what you're talking about. You might just be really good at creating reels on Instagram, and you've documented your journey going from like a 4:15 marathoner to a 3:15 marathoner, and that's gotten you hundreds of thousands of followers, but you're not actually a coach. You're just more like an influencer. And so I would just be really careful with folks who aren't formal coaches, who don't actually have any real experience in the sport, running on a team, having a coach themselves, and really just having that deep experience in the sport. And so that's some of the drawbacks to social media I've found in the running community.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned is finding the expert. And we talked about it in the green room. Like when it comes to nutrition, people will ask us questions, how many carbs, whatever the question is. And it's immediately go to the nutrition page on our website. Every article there is written by an expert in the field, or I'll connect you to somebody like Stevie Lynn Smith, who is an expert in her field as well. And I think what you bring up there is super important, right? I'm a 4:15 runner. I've become a 3:15 runner, but I'm really an influencer. I'm not really a coach. And when people are asking those questions, they're giving an expertise of N equals 1, right? I've done it myself. For you, you've coached, I'm guessing, thousands of athletes over thousands of different experiences, right? Some come to you fresh out of the box and never run a 5K. Some of them are, experienced runners looking to run a marathon. How important is it for you personally to have a mix of different athletes on your roster so that you're working at the 5K, the marathon, the ultra type of thing?
I think it's really important because it's basically a diversity of professional experience that ultimately leaves you a better coach. And there's all kinds of different things that make people good coaches. You don't have to be a former pro runner. I think if you are a pro runner, it probably helps to hire someone who has experience at those levels of performance. Having a coach who understands viscerally the sport and what it's like to train really hard, I think is important. But with that said, look for a coaching certification, look for years of experience as a runner, but also as a coach. I would also look for your coach to have been coached at some point in their life. It's like, well, if you've never experienced the thing that you want to do, how do you know how to do it? So, I've had more than 10 coaches in my career, from assistant coaches to cross-country coaches in indoor track and outdoor track. And, the strength coaches I've worked with in the gym as well. And so it's just this very large breadth of experience that comes from, the coaching certification, but it's coming from cross country. It's coming from indoor track, outdoor track. It's coming from, me racing everything from the 200 to triathlon, duathlon, track races, cross country, trail races, running at altitude and at sea level, and dry climates to East Coast humidity. I know we're talking about that in the green room and talking about how much we hate humidity, and just really, like, do you have experience doing it all, coaching runners of a whole different variety of ability levels and talent levels. And do you have the background to support all that? So I think all of those things are really important. And so it's a big checklist of these things. You don't have to have all of them, but the more you have, I think the better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was coached by Maria Simona, the No Limits Endurance Coaching team, when I was getting into Ironman distance racing, 2011 ish. And I remember this lesson that she taught me way back then, right? So we're talking 13 years. And she said to me, Jason, stress is stress. Your body doesn't know that you've just run 5 miles or that you're dealing with financial stress or marital stress or family stress or whatever it is. It just knows stress. And I've been able to take that to having launched this business 4 years ago, because you're under stress in building this business, that when you go out to work out, things may not always work out the way you want them to because you're under stress. And so I think your point about having coaches be coached gives you all of that different experience that you can put together, then put to get forward your best foot. Like, this is Jason Fitzgerald and this is his coaching, but he's taken from all of these different areas. Similar to when they talk about like Bill Parcells' coaching tree and how that dropped down to Bill Belichick and all these other coaches in the NFL kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because it's not just my personal experience, it's the experiences of all of the athletes that I've coached. It's all of the wisdom from the coaches that I've had the good fortune to work with at the high school and collegiate level. And I used to bother my old cross country coach all the time for training advice after I had graduated, especially when I was moving up to some of the longer distances that we never touched in college. So all those experiences were so valuable, and I just wouldn't be the coach I am today if I didn't have those coaches, or if I didn't read, the dozens of training books that I've read, and every single data point on my coaching journey.
Do you, would you consider yourself a lifelong learner?
I think so. Yeah, I think you can't see it. Here we go. I'm always surrounded by a whole ton of books, and, try to read very widely. Probably a relic of my liberal arts education. I like learning about a whole different variety of things. And so, yeah, I do consider myself a lifelong learner.
Because the reason why I ask that is I think it's important. You've been a coach for 13, 14, going on 15 years at this point. And I don't think you get to that area without learning along the way, right? Like, the way you coached in year 1 and the way you coach in year 15 are going to be different. And I think that's a strength based on perspective, right? You're able to have a clear perspective of life is going to always be changing. Life is going to always have different stresses. There are going to be moments that are easier and harder. How do you implement that lifelong learning and perspective understanding with your athletes as they're going through some tough times? Let's say, I know a lot of athletes deal with taper not so well, right? Like, I can't believe I can't run 8 hours today for the marathon that's in 24 hours. How do you work with them from that perspective to get them to understand, like, look, we need to slow down so that you can be strong for race day?
Yeah, it's a tough question, because I think it partly comes from having those different experiences and just coaching a whole different, types of runners over the years. And you realize that the way that you coach one person might have to be very different from the way that you coach another person. So part of this process of lifelong learning is just asking myself all the time, how can I be a better coach? How can I communicate this idea or principle or even a criticism of an athlete, of how they're approaching their training? How can I do this in a way that's going to resonate with them and really get through to them in a certain way? So there's the coaching side of things, where I'm just trying to be a better coach all the time. I do think, having my podcast has been an amazing opportunity for professional development, because when I have a physical therapist or a sports psychologist or a strength training expert or another running coach, and we're talking about all these kind of related subject matters, nutrition and diet is not what I do as a running coach, but I should be a pretty knowledgeable amateur in that area to help my athletes with basic diet or fueling questions. And same thing with physical therapy. I think every coach, as well as every runner, should be able to manage small niggles and just personal, little things that come up, or else you're going to be in a PT office 3 times a week. And that's not really a sustainable option. So the podcast has been incredible for me because I've been able to learn from these world-class experts, the Olympians and the people that surround the Olympian to help them get to those performance levels. In preparing and doing research for those conversations, it's just been a wonderful learning opportunity for me to learn more about all the areas around running, the physiology, the training theory and exercise science that informs why we're doing what we're doing every day during the training process. So besides, being kind of a running nerd and reading a lot of running books, I think the podcast and just the art and craft of coaching are all really important to help me continue getting better at what I do.
Did you watch the docuseries Sprint on Netflix?
Yes, I did.
What'd you take away?
I think I have one episode left to go. I haven't finished it.
Okay. What's been one of the lessons you've learned from that documentary? Because they are out there with their coaches, talking to their coaches. The coaches are interviewed and working with them to obviously get better to win gold medals. What was something you took away from the docuseries so far?
I think two things that always impress me with this caliber of athlete is that they're very process oriented. Like when they show them at the track doing a workout, they might be joking around in between sets and have kind of a lighthearted approach to things. But if you actually watch what they're doing, they're very kind of formal in their approach to training, and they're not going to skip things. They are really adamant about being very methodical with, okay, I'm going to warm up. I'm going to do these drills. Oh, wait, my form wasn't great on that drill. Let me get some feedback. Let me try it again. Let me do it the right way. Okay. And they're just so professional in their approach. And I sometimes get frustrated with runners who are like, well, I'm not a pro runner. Well, you could approach your running more professionally and get very, very good results because of a more professional approach. Just like if you wanted to become a better cook in the kitchen, being a more professional and having a more professional approach to how you cook a fancy meal is going to help you be a better cook in the kitchen. Same thing with running. We can be more professional, and that really helps us with the approach. I think the other thing that I took from it is that, some of these characters are characters, and they're very funny. They're also very confident, and they're like, well, I want to win that gold medal. I want to win that world championship, and they're unapologetic about how competitive they are. And I love that. Like, I'm a very competitive person. I think sometimes we forget that running is a sport that we compete in. And so, sometimes I get a little squeamish around people who are like, you only ever compete against yourself. And it's like, well, that's sometimes true, but we also compete against others in a race situation. And there's a lot of runners who care about what place they are, and they're trying to win an age group award, or they have a performance goal. So you're not always competing against yourself. And I think these high-level athletes show us that it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to have high standards for yourself. You don't have to be a professional runner to approach the sport a bit more professionally.
I will back you up on this, approaching it more professionally. After I watched the episode where Noah Lyles, I think it might be the second to last episode, maybe third to last episode, is out there and he's training, and they're showing him, he takes like 5 steps and stops and turns around, gets back in the blocks, takes like 5 steps. And it was because he wasn't going slow enough out of the gate to then get down to the 100 meters. And I've been doing strides within my training lately, more and more in the middle. And instead of hammering it right from the get-go, I learned from him, like, he's building this momentum to get to top speed. And instead of being at top speed the moment that watch beeps to tell me do my strides for 30 seconds, it's building into it. And I have found him to become easier because of that, because I'm not trying to hit top speed on step one. And so, I mean, that's one of the takeaways I got from that show. And again, I'm not running 100 meters, right? I'm running for miles on end, but I think we can all learn from different things.
That is such a great example of being process oriented because, a stride, it isn't a sprint. Those are two separate things. And, strides, you should accelerate into it. And so you're probably able to run even faster at the peak of the stride because you're starting it slower. And so this is a really great example of almost making your training a little bit easier so that you can get more out of it and ultimately become, a better runner. You're doing better strides because you're doing them the way that they're supposed to be done and not just trying to run really fast. So yeah, when I see beginner runners try to do strides, they treat them like little mini races, and that's not what they are. And so making your training easier is often a really great way to become faster, counterintuitively.
And I think this goes to the whole idea of being a lifelong learner. I've been participating in these sports for 17 years, and still it took a moment of visualization of seeing Noah Lyles do this to remind myself, okay, this is how you should be doing it as well. And to your point, making my training easier so that I can get faster and run harder. Um, Before we jump into the rapid fire food questions, as we're running out of time here, I've been wanting to bring this up because I found it to be amazing on your website. You mentioned combining the right workouts with mileage, strength, exercise, recovery extras. The benefits are obvious. What are the extras in that scenario?
Yeah, I think the extras are all the things that runners tend to skip if they're short on time. So now all of a sudden runners are like, oh, I know what he's talking about because I skip those things. you know, it's the dynamic warm up before you go running. It's being more process oriented, making sure that the first mile of your run or first kilometer or two is a little bit slower, so you're kind of easing into the effort. We just talked about that with strides. Strides are a great example of something that would be considered an extra, even though I don't really consider any of these things extras. Doing some physical therapy oriented core or strength training to keep yourself healthy. Going into the gym twice a week for some weightlifting, maybe doing form drills before your next workout. All these things that we do that aren't the running portion of our training that we often, set down to the side when we're short on time. Those are all the extras. And I don't really consider them extra. It's just part of the training process. And so, when runners realize that, look, let's not call ourselves runners. Let's call ourselves athletes that specialize in running. And that little bit of a, change in how we describe ourselves then allows us to think a little bit more broadly about our training. Okay, I'm not a runner. I'm not just going to run. I'm an athlete. I need to do things that make me athletic. I need to do drills. I need to do all kinds of skips and hops and plyometrics and strength exercises and mobility movements and things like that. And now all of a sudden I'm moving better. I'm feeling stronger. I'm feeling more fluid and graceful with my movements. My running economy is improving. You just become a better runner with all that kind of work. And it's no surprise that if you were to visit a university track practice, you would see all these athletes doing these things. They are not professionals, but they sure are treating the sport very professionally.
It's so funny. For those of you who are going to be listening to this show, the moment Jason mentioned being a better athlete, the smile went from ear to ear on my face. And the reason being is for years, I have told people, you want to become a better athlete. And I know that I've been involved in multi-sport for a number of years. So I'm swimming, cycling, and running. And so people might think, well, that's where that comes from. And the reality is no. Becoming a better athlete allows you to work muscles that you wouldn't normally work if you're quote unquote only a runner. Getting in the gym, doing the stretching, doing the balance work, doing the mobility work, all of those things are going to help you become a better athlete so that, to your point, Jason, I can train easier and still get better because I'm becoming a more well-rounded athlete. So I super appreciate that commentary. I think that hits home for me, and hopefully for the majority of our listeners, is become a better athlete.
Yeah. And, I think other sports have better ways of describing this phenomenon. If you were a basketball player or you played soccer or American football, we would talk about playing the sport. And then we would also talk about skill development and conditioning. When we are in the weight room getting stronger, we're conditioning ourselves. A lot of our sport is basically conditioning, long runs, base mileage, things like that. That's all conditioning. When we do race specific workouts and when we race, we do those kinds of hard sessions. That's more the sport itself. But, the conditioning I think is just as important as, the training itself. So getting in the gym, the strides, the drills, the dynamic flexibility movements, those are all skill oriented types of training. So if we can borrow a little bit of that terminology from another sport, it gives us a little bit of a better way of describing how we should be thinking about our training.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm one of those athletes, and it probably has accumulated over time where I love going to the gym and doing strength training, 30, 45 minutes, focused strength training work, as well as doing the balance, core, stretching, mobility work. Again, 17 years in the sport, nary an injury. And I accredit that to conditioning my body, like you used that phrase, through other components of the sport of running, strength training and all these other things. And I think that's super important because the best ability, right, to have or the best ability to have to run is availability. And if you're at the PT's office 3 times a week, like you mentioned earlier, it's going to be really difficult to run if you're laying on, the bed getting stretched out and worked on completely. So we've been chatting for 45 minutes. I could do this for another 2 hours easily because one of the things I didn't ask you about is you mentioned dynamic warm-ups, but we didn't mention cool downs. And so I'd like to touch on that before we move on is, how important is a cool down and what does that look like, right? Because we can talk about dynamic warm-ups and immediately people have envisions of them swinging their legs forward and backward, side to side, walking lunges, high knees, like you automatically know what that is. But what about cool downs? What should an athlete kind of be looking to do when it comes to cooling down after a run?
It depends a little bit on what type of run we're talking about. So I would categorize runs as either easy runs or workouts. So even a long run is basically a glorified easy run. Most long runs are just very long, easy runs. And then, of course, if you're advanced, you can start putting some quality into those long runs. And now it becomes a little bit of a hybrid day. But, if you are running a workout, so a structured, faster training session, your cool down is going to be some easy running. And then I think ideally some mobility work, some strength training. Maybe you're getting in the gym to lift some weights, or you could just be doing some body weight work, in your living room on a yoga mat or something like that. So for the workout, it's really a 2-part cool down. It's easy running, and then there's some form of strength or mobility. For just an easy run, if you're going for a long run or you just have a shorter recovery run, you don't have to obviously do easy running after your easy running to help yourself cool down. Like the whole run was basically a very long cool down. But I do think there's value in still doing some type of mobility work, some type of strength training. And I've always promoted this sandwiching concept where I like to see every run sandwiched in between a dynamic warm up and then some type of core or strength work. And that could be as short as a 10-minute, relatively easy body weight routine that's going to look like what you do in a PT's office. Or it could be a 45 or 60-minute gym session where you're lifting relatively heavy weights, with implements in the weight room. So the cool down process does depend a little bit. I think generally speaking, the harder the workout, the more you need to cool down just to get yourself back to a baseline. Sort of like the harder the workout, the more of a warm up you want. You need a bigger on ramp to that peak of intensity. And then it can be helpful to have a longer off ramp from that peak of intensity. But if it's just an easy run, I would love to see a strength workout, maybe 10 minutes of mobility work, some band work. And then if you want to hit the foam roller and give yourself some self massage, if you've got a massage gun, that's another great place to use it is at the end of your workout. And that's just going to leave you feeling good the rest of the day. Because I think everyone's had that experience where you run a hard workout or a long run and you get home and you sit down and maybe you look at your phone and you update it on Strava. Next thing you know, you've been sitting down for 45 minutes. And then when you get up from that chair, you feel terrible. You feel tight. Oh my God. Oh, my hip flexors hurt me for some weird reason. you just weren't ready. You went from running to sedentary like a car crash. It was immediate. And instead, we need that longer off ramp from that peak of intensity. So let's go through a whole bunch of strength exercises. You'll be going through a bigger range of motion. It's going to leave you feeling a little bit more loose, more limber throughout the day. And then if you want to do some foam rolling or other kind of massage work, that's just really going to help you feel even better.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that explanation, because I remember when I was training for my first 100-miler, I was talking to a friend and he said, don't sit in the holy shit chairs. And I was like, what's a holy shit chair? And he's like, the minute you sit down after going like 10, 12 miles or whatever, you sit down and you try to stand back up. You're like, holy shit. I was like, so I've avoided the sitting in a chair during ultras for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever start running again. If I sat down at an ultra aid station, I would have to just keep standing.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, have you ever started walking in a marathon? It's so hard to then keep running again.
Yeah.
I would rather just slow down.
Oh, awesome. Hey, Jason, let the audience know where they can find you and get in touch with you so they can learn from your vast knowledge of experience with strength coaching and running.
Well, strengthrunning.com is my home base. You can learn more about all the different content that I have there. We have different courses on different topics. So if you're interested in learning more about strength training for runners or injury prevention or even mindset, we have, free email courses that will talk about all those different topics. You can also check out the Strength Running podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and the Strength Running YouTube channel if you prefer video too.
Awesome. You ready for our rapid fire food questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. You're an East Coaster, and so I'm really interested in getting your take on this. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
Yay. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. If you don't like it, go do you, but I'm okay with it. Give me a Hawaiian pizza with ham and pineapple and I'd be kind of happy. Sorry to disappoint everyone.
You're only disappointing the host. That's all.
Yeah, I know. Blasphemy.
Oreos. Do you prefer the original, the double stuff, or their two newest products? The thin, which is basically a cracker, and the Cakester, which is basically one of those like ding dong type cakes.
I'm a big fan of the double stuffed Oreos. You got to dip them in milk. I'm also someone who likes to dip them for such a long time that they're essentially mush. And a pro tip for anyone who really likes dipping double stuffed Oreos is the first Oreo, just put it in the glass of milk. Let it sink to the bottom. That is your treat at the end of the milk. Okay. So you enjoy all of your Oreos that you're dipping in there. And then you're like, oh, I guess I'm done. And you start finishing the milk. You've got a little surprise for yourself, like your little retirement nest egg at the bottom of that glass of milk waiting for you when you're finally done.
I love it. Licorice, are you a fan?
No, get out of here with that. Absolutely not. Maybe a red licorice. Maybe, if I'm 20 miles into a run and I need something. The black licorice, I'd rather drink pond water.
Peeps. Are Peeps a real candy, or are they just marshmallow covered in gold glitter?
Both. They are like some weird blown marshmallow type of substance that is covered with weird granulated sugar. I like Peeps with the caveat that I like to eat like 2 or 3 a year and then never look at them again until next Easter.
Okay, so around Easter, you've got an Easter basket filled with the Cadbury cream egg, the Reese's peanut butter cup, straight up jelly beans, and Peeps, and then the hollow chocolate bunny. Which one is getting thrown in the trash first, and which one is absolutely getting hidden from the kids?
I'm probably throwing in the trash the hollow chocolate bunny because that just doesn't really give me too much fun and excitement. But the Cadbury cream eggs are getting hidden from the children because those are all mine. Those are, just chef's kiss. One of the best types of candy ever. And I think one of the best because they are seasonal and you can't have them all the time. So as soon as there's a little bit of scarcity involved, they become even more tastier.
I am blown away. So we had Lauren Callahan on yesterday, and she was a thumbs up on the Cadbury cream egg. and you are a thumbs up on the Cadbury cream egg, and I couldn't throw those things away fast enough.
Oh, mail them to me, Jason.
You're in. Candy corn. Is candy corn a real candy, or is it just earwax covered in sugar?
Oh, I kind of like candy corn. I either love it or I hate it. Like I'll eat like a handful and I'll be like, oh, that was interesting. I don't want to see these again until next Halloween. So I'm a little bit in the middle on those. It's like I haven't decided.
But the novelty on those doesn't work in its favor then.
Why is that?
Well, because you're like, yeah, I could take them or leave them. Whereas with the Peeps, you're like, it's awesome. Or the Cadbury cream egg, excuse me. You're like, it's awesome because it only comes around during Easter.
Yeah, I just don't think the other candies is as good. You know, like the Cadbury cream egg is amazing, and it's made more amazing because you can't get it all the time. You know, the corn is just, I mean, it's candy corn. Who wants to eat a candy version of a piece of corn? I don't know. This is so not running related. I'm having a great time.
It's perfect. Creamy or crunchy peanut butter? Which do you prefer?
Prefer creamy, although I'm a little bit agnostic. There's a time and a place for crunchy.
When you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, do you put peanut butter on one slice of bread, jelly on the other, smash them together, or do you put peanut butter and jelly on the same slice of bread and then fold over the top?
What are you talking? I do it the normal way where I put peanut butter on one side and then the jelly on the other side. How do you spread jelly on peanut butter? That sounds like you're doing it the hard way, and you're going to get peanut butter on the knife. So if you don't get all the jelly the first time, you're then going to be putting peanut butter into the jelly jar. So I'm going to say I do it the non-sociopath way.
A sociopath here. I just tilt the jelly jar and then just kind of scrape it out and it falls on and you spread it around.
Hey, whatever works.
How do you prefer your peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Do you eat it as a whole, one big slab of bread? Do you cut it in half vertically so you have two rectangles, or on an angle so you have two triangles? Or do you go 4 squares or 4 triangles?
Oof. I 4 triangles was actually just not even on my radar at all. So you've just blown my mind with peanut butter and jelly opportunities here. I would either not cut it at all or do the diagonal slice. I grew up with it being cut in half, equal, rectangles. And when I became an adult and really kind of stopped eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I discovered that some people do it diagonally and came to prefer that way as an adult, even though I don't really eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches too much these days.
I'm a 4 triangle guy. I learned it from my mom. It's
Wow.
it's like tapas. It's like little peanut butter and jelly tapas. You get little bits.
Yeah, no, that sounds fun. I'm gonna try that the next time I make these for my kids.
We had an answer that blew my mind. Shannon, she goes by B Short Run Ultra on Twitter. She says she cuts it into 2 rectangles, but then turns the sandwich and eats it like corn on the cob so that she doesn't eat the crusts. And it just totally blew my mind because I was like, well, why don't you just cut the crusts off? And she's like, because then you could get messy all over your hands. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
There's a million and one ways to do the most simple thing, isn't there?
Red velvet cake. Is red velvet a real flavor, or is it just chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom?
It is chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom. And I say that as someone who enjoys red velvet cake. It's a chocolate derivative,
Exactly.
It's like you can get like strawberry flavored chocolate. That's still chocolate. So
Right.
red velvet is still chocolate. Are you trying to tell me that's not chocolate just because you dyed it a different color? Get out of here with that.
Exactly. Do you have a favorite type of cake?
I'm not a huge cake guy. I mean, I love I like any kind of carrot cake, actually. The cream cheese frosting is just does something to tickle my brain and right the right way. I love cream cheese frosting. So red velvet cake, carrot cake, those are some of my favorites.
What about pie? What's your favorite type of pie?
Love pie. Blueberry pie is one of my favorite kinds of pies. Although if you give me some pie, I'm probably gonna eat it. I'm not too picky.
What about on the tart end? I'm a huge fan. Key lime pie is my favorite, followed by lemon pie.
I like a lemon pie much better than a key lime pie. If I have key lime, I just need to have a small piece. I find the flavor can be a little overwhelming if I'm having like a piece that you might have after a long run.
We did a Food Fight Friday last week about pie, and I got I wouldn't say roasted, but it got pointed out to me that I only included sweet pie and not savory pie, like a shepherd's pie. And I was like, oh, good point. Or chicken pot pie.
Those are pies, but they're obviously a different kind of pie. I love a shepherd's pie or a chicken pot pie. In fact, I used to order that at restaurants as one of my go-tos a while back. So it's so good that I'm ordering it at restaurants. Yeah.
What's your favorite pre-race meal?
I'm pretty simple. If it's a relatively short race, I might only do something like a banana and an energy bar, and then maybe I'll have a gel right beforehand. If it's a longer race, like a marathon, I'll probably do I'll add oatmeal to that, but keep that pretty simple. And then, of course, a whole bucket load of caffeine.
There you go. What's your favorite way to make coffee then? Espresso, pour over, French press, drip?
I'm a French press guy. I like a fresh ground coffee bean. So I'm not too fancy with the kind of coffee beans that I get, but grinding it fresh and then brewing it right there, just a single cup, is a really nice way to have a cup of coffee, in my opinion.
What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Ooh, cookies and cream, mint chocolate chip, coffee Oreo. Coffee Oreo is up there too. Those are
Nice.
some great ones for me. I had some s'mores ice cream last night.
Ooh. Clearly, cookies and cream would have to be if the first move with the Oreo is leaving it in the milk until the very end.
What can I say? I just love that Oreo flavor. It's just a little taste of Americana right there.
Favorite candy bar?
Maybe Butterfinger.
Oh, nice. That's the second time in, I think, 3 interviews we've gotten Butterfinger. It's moving up the list, Nestle.
Yeah, it's a great candy bar, interesting flavor to it. I think it's a little bit of a niche candy bar. It's not your average Snickers, Milky Way. I don't know, those are a little basic in my mind, but the Butterfinger, just fantastic.
You can only eat one type of food for the rest of your life. Are you going savory or sweet?
Savory, 100%. I have less of a sweet tooth and more of like a fatty, salty tooth. Like I'm happy with bar food over a dessert, and that's the kind of food that I would prefer.
Pop-Tarts, frosted or unfrosted?
Frosted, 100%. I'm not even sure why this is a question.
The face you made when the word unfrosted came out was all I needed to see.
I like taking very hard positions on things that don't matter.
Hey, me too. It's why we get sent, I'm telling you, Jason, we get sent 2 to 3 pictures or memes a week about pineapple on pizza because I'm so against it. I don't give a shit if you enjoy it. I'm just never going to eat it myself. Chocolate chip cookie or oatmeal raisin cookie?
Ooh, that's a tough one because I do enjoy both. If I had to choose, probably go with the OG chocolate chip. Definitely dipped in milk.
And then the last question for you, a tray of brownies is coming out of the oven. Are you going to the edge where you have a little bit of that crust and a little bit of handle with some ooey gooey? Or are you going straight to the middle where you get all ooey gooey?
I want the gooey. So I'm going to go in the middle. I'm going to get that non-crusty piece and put a little whipped cream on it. And that's a great afternoon right there, Jason.
No ice cream on the top of your brownie?
Yeah, if I have some vanilla ice cream, that would also be really good. I didn't add this when we talked about pies. Not a shepherd's pie, but some of the sweet pies go really well with vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
I think the warmer it is, like if you have hot apple pie or a hot brownie, that is the perfect opportunity for some vanilla ice cream.
Since you're a coffee fan and you like coffee ice cream, I will encourage you to put a piece of the brownie in a mug and coffee ice cream on top and eat it that way so that by the time the ice cream melts, you end up basically with a mocha. And it's
Wow.
fantastic.
Jason, you've blown my mind. I can't wait to try that. You've introduced me to some new ways of eating things that I'm very excited to try soon.
My job here is done. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are just getting here, thank you for showing up. This will be on our Instagram page here in about an hour, but it will be on our YouTube channel and our website on Friday. And then on September 18th, you'll be able to get it wherever you get your podcast. Jason,